Welcome everyone to the Acronis Operational Technology Virtual Conference. Today we're going to discuss how to protect OT systems after Windows 10 end of support. My name is Julia Kertes, and today I'll be your host. I'm a senior marketing manager at Acronis, and my primary focus is at the programs that support operational technology sectors. And now let's meet our speakers. Gary Southwell, President of ARIA Cybersecurity. Welcome, Gary. Could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, hi, I'm Gary Southwell. I'm the president of ARIA Cybersecurity. I've been in cybersecurity for well over 20 years. And at ARIA, we focus on solving the difficult problems that industrial systems have in providing protection and lockdown of their operations.
Thank you so much for joining our webinar. I will call you back to the panel. Ryan Davis, Senior Director of Enterprise and OEM Partnership at Acronis. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Julia. Happy to be here. Excited to talk to everyone. I've been at Acronis for a very long time, predominantly in the enterprise space. OT, industrial automation, R&D, purpose-built computing has been a very large segment for Acronis. We have a lot of experience both working with the end customers as well as the automation suppliers that manufacture the industrial control system. So I have a lot of learnings to share.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Harold Cowan, Principal OT Consultant at ARIA Cybersecurity. Welcome, Harold.
I'm Harold Cowan. I've got 27 years of OT experience working in pharmaceuticals, and I'm the Principal OT Consultant here at ARIA.
Thank you so much. J.D. Perham, Solutions Architect at Acronis.
Thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. I've worked with Ryan pretty much the entirety of my career here at Acronis, doing the exact same thing he's doing, helping our customers in the OT or manufacturing type space. So happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. We have great experts today here, so we're going to have a good time, and let's see what we're going to do in the next hour. So first, I'm going to give a brief overview of the current OT cybersecurity threats landscape. We will talk a little bit about compliance and OT strategies after Windows 10 end of support. Then I'll bring back our panel, and we will talk to our experts from ARIA and Acronis. And after that, you will see two short demos of the solutions that specifically focusing on protecting and recovering OT systems without causing a long downtime. So it's going to be really useful for you, so please stay until the end. And if we will have some time left, we will cover your questions live. Let's talk about the OT cyber threats, compliance, and strategies after Windows 10 end of support, a little bit to settle the stage before our expert panel. And if we talk about the threats, for the past few years, we see that the threats that used to normally live in IT environments, they start moving to OT, like ransomware, AI-enabled attacks, and supply chain compromises. Cyber attackers, they don't stop in corporate IT anymore. They move to OT adjacent systems because they see that this is where organizations get hurt the most. Another pressure point is legacy systems, because plants, they usually use PC-based OT systems that run on older versions of Windows and Linux. So that means they cannot be upgraded or patched. One of the common entry points for OT environments still remain the remote access compromise and supply chain links. Vendors are essential, as we all know, but this is still something what brings the entry point into OT environments. And besides this, operational failures like misconfiguration, hardware failure, environmental events, they still cause approximately the same amount of failures like cyber attackers. And if we talk about the examples, you probably heard in the summertime in the UK, there was attack on Jaguar Land Rover, which caused downtime for more than 5 weeks and cost them more than $2 billion. And this example shows how easily IT-originated attack can translate into manufacturing downtime. Another example was with United Natural Foods in America, also in the summertime. And they have supply chain of retailers, like more than 30,000 of them. And they suffered from ransomware, which affected whole supply chain. So it's pretty serious. And as the trend of 2026, we can see that the biggest trend is how we can keep the company with uptime. So resilience is now determined as the ability to stay protected, recover fast, and presume the failure. If we talk about the importance of the Windows systems, we know that OT professionals, they face constantly that OS systems, they reach end of support much earlier than the hardware does. And as you know, Windows 10 already reached end of support in October 2025. And in OT, most of environments, they also use LTSC version. And if even it seems that 2027, 2029 can look far away, it's still within the planning window. So it's something that companies need to think about now, not in the future. And if we talk about where Windows 10 sits in the OT environments and what processes it affects, we can take a look at the Purdue model. And you can see that Windows systems, they usually are in IT/OT buffer zone, operational systems level 3, and supervisory control level 2, meaning that if the systems are affected, operators losing the visibility, control, and recovery times, they become longer. That's what recently happened in December 2025 in European energy grid. The operators lost control and visibility. So the malicious attack went through to the level 1 and affected the RTUs. So it's very important to keep the systems supported and take the measures to make sure that attacks not going through. And as we see that the number of attacks keep rising, and attackers, they don't stop on IT level, they go into OT, and we probably will see more and more targeted attacks in OT environments. The compliance regulations, they also changing and they become stricter. So if we take a look at the IC 62443, NIS2, NIST, CSF, and other compliances, you can see that they now really precisely reflect that they require availability, recovery, and continuity. Besides this, for legacy systems, they all now allow compensating controls. And as I mentioned in the pre-example, the loss of visibility and control, for example, NIS2 and NERC CIP, even loss of control and visibility, they consider as materialized attacks. So you still need to be very careful and take measures even from compliance standpoint. And now if we talk about the pathways that OT professionals have, there are basically 4 of them. Some may stay on Windows 10 and buy extended security updates. This way they will reduce immediate change risk, but still they will need to apply compensating controls. Others can use IoT version where it's possible, but they will still be hardware bound. The newer systems, they can be migrated to Windows 11, but there are also limitations, so it's not applicable to the all OT environment. And the option 4 is something that is now more applicable to most current OT environments. It's staying on Windows 10 and adding compensating controls like segmentation, controlled access, backup recovery, and allowlisting. And why just moving to Windows 11 is not realistic? That's because most of the OT assets, like HMIs, engineering workstations, historians, they're pretty old. 8-15 years, and they just simply don't support Windows 11. You can apply it on the upper zone, like IT/OT buffer zone, with the newer assets or with virtualization. But for most OT environments, it will require replacing certified hardware, validation of the OEM software, or for those that have stricter requirements like pharma and energy, they may need to go through the recertification, which means it will cause downtime, higher cost, and operational risk. So if we talk about protecting operational systems after Windows 10 end of support, you need to keep the balance. So you still need defensive measures like air gapping, network segmentation, system hardening like applications allow listing as it can stop even zero-day attacks, controlled access. But at the same time, you need to think about the recovery measures because attacks getting sophisticated and cybercriminals, they don't stop in the IT environments anymore. So you need to think about the measures like mutable backup, self-service recovery, where engineers don't need to depend on immediate IT intervention. And with this brief overview, please welcome our panel. Gary, Ryan, please welcome back to us.
Thanks, Julia. Great opening.
Thank you. Yes, I was a little bit nervous. You are experts here. You work with a lot of customers. You see different environments of various OT systems. So could you please tell us what are the biggest cyber resilience and uptime challenges you see today across real OT environments?
Well, Gary, I'll give you an opportunity to open and I'll jump on from there.
Sure. So, we're involved with a wide swath of people in OT, everything from manufacturers to energy producers, water, wastewater. Across the board, as far as resilience goes, I would say address that first. With the integration of IT and OT over the last, during this decade, there's been a real concern that, when you get updates coming in from the IT side, which are often frequent, they actually need to be cached up and stored so that they can be applied during maintenance windows. And there's always that yin and yang between IT and OT in those environments. So one example of what can happen is we've actually gone into, I'll give you an example of a steel manufacturer. They were interested in having our product go in for cyber defense to stop ransomware. We went in there and showed them not only could we do that, but we could also do something we call the ICS lockdown, which would prevent any unintended updates happening to their environment. The next week, they called us in and we went there and they said, your ICS control works pretty good. We had a problem with IT. They had to reboot the firewall to DMARC, and 140 updates tried to come in to the steel manufacturing environment. Unfortunately, we stopped those. If that had happened, they would have been out of production for several days. If it happened when they were actually live, which is not their normal business practice, then human harm could have been done. So these are types of concerns that a lot of our customers have, which is, I've got to adapt to this new IT/OT integration, but I've got to put in the ability to control my environment so that bad things don't happen. I can maintain production and I can maintain safety. Those are usually the biggest concerns. And then as you move to the other part, which are uptime challenges, is that the OT environments we all see are usually production oriented, meaning that they've taken a lot of time to automate everything they possibly can to ensure that they can produce revenue very consistently without risk. And some of these plants are running round the clock. So they don't want anything that will disrupt that risk. So obviously the things I talked about are patching and updates and any upgrades. Those are huge disruptions to their business model, especially if there's no real ROI to do those things. You can think of it as just a negative ROI that they have to absorb, that it hits the bottom line. So there's that real concern is, how do I stay safe, but minimize the need to have any risk to my production uptime? There's a phrase I've used in the past that people talk about is like IT is used to continuous patching. OT relates that to continuous disruption because when the patching is happening at the application level, the application then usually reboots. And if they have, which we get in these environments, like hundreds to thousands of these applications or many applications running, you could constantly have applications rebooting, which could then basically disrupt production.
Yeah, great point, Gary. The CIA triad is typically inverted in OT, right, compared to IT in terms of your reference to continuous disruption. And we could probably use the whole panel for me kind of commenting on this topic, but from a high level, what I would say is the biggest challenges are really, for one of the first times, I'm really seeing an intersection of internal and external trends that are driving all of these challenges. And what I mean by that is historically, OT was very reactive driven, right? We had an incident. What caused it? What control do I need to do to fix it? Whether it's business continuity or security, and they plug that hole. I have an audit coming up. What do I need to do to pass that audit, right? And so very, very reactive driven. But now what we're seeing is from an internal perspective, digital transformation initiatives are often tied to smart factories or AI are driving an increased attack surface, right? You want to use AI to analyze data to make better decisions. You're going to interconnect and network more of these devices. Boom, you have a greater attack surface, right? So to accomplish those positive outcomes from the digital transformation initiatives, you need investment to have better protection, right? So that's internal. But let's say a company says, you know what, I'm going to do that, but I don't want to invest in the cyber resilience measures, right? I just don't want to do it. Well, externally, in a lot of cases, you don't have the choice anymore, right? The regulatory environment has dramatically changed. When I started at Acronis way back in 2008, there was really only like NERC SIP for bulk power in the US, some FDA for GXP, as well as more industry or vertical specific kind of regulations. Now we're seeing things like the CRA or NIS2 in the European Union that are just broad, regional based. And we see the same CRF in Saudi Arabia. Japan just passed the Active Cyber Defense Act, which comes into effect in 2027, although they probably wish they did it sooner. Otherwise, the Asahi might have still been brewing beer in December. And so you have these internal changes that are driving increased recognition of more exposure. But then you're also being forced from a regulatory environment. And even if you're in the US, if you're doing business in Europe, you may be accountable to some of those regulations. And then that's compounded by, Julia talked about Windows 10 being end of life. I mean, I have a partner, an automation vendor that says they still sell new XP systems, right? Much less Windows 10. So you're having platform changes from end of life from an operating perspective, or things like Broadcom being very disruptive in terms of the virtualization space that are causing customers to react. So you see those two trends colliding and intersecting, and what's the outcome of that? Well, the users have a lot more that they feel that they're obligated to do now with the very same resources, same hands, maybe similar budgets, right? And so the ultimate result of what is occurring is I'm seeing organizations start to make more intentional, forward-thinking decisions, right? Rather than just reacting to events on the ground, they may take stock. And outcomes could be, oh, we need IT's help. We spent the last 20 years creating the great wall between IT and OT, but now let's try and converge, right? So do we build dedicated stacks or dedicated teams? Or do we adopt and bring in the expertise on the OT side and build a dedicated stack for what we're trying to do so we can be more efficient rather than adopting point solution here, point solution here, point solution here, and suddenly you've got 20 products that you've got to manage and not enough people. So again, both the internal trends as well as the regulatory platform-driven external trends are driving an elevated level of requirements, and organizations are needing to be more proactive in response.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. And if we talk about applications which remain vulnerable long after vendor support patching them, so how are plans realistically protecting legacy applications they cannot upgrade? Gary, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, I'll start off there. So you look at how things have changed over this decade. The initial answer to that was try to do as much with the network to lock down those devices running those applications from any form of connectivity. So therefore, you could keep anything bad from happening to them. That all made sense. We call it air gapping. Challenges is real air gapping is really, really hard. So it's hard to stay air gap continuously, because often what would happen is even during patching events or updates, then suddenly things are networked together and suppliers come in and bad things happen, when you get these updates coming through, because some compromise happened from some poor system integrator went from one place to the next and brought something bad in with them, those types of things. So you couldn't stop the sneakers from, breaking the air gap, the people walking in, the maintenance laptops and engineering laptops and USBs and what have you. So the next level that's been advocated from like the NIST cybersecurity framework is to do what we call defense in depth. And that's been talked about in the IT space, but now we're bringing it into the OT space. And if you look at that Purdue model, it's looking at those devices that were shown that are from level 1 up to level 3.5. We need to have something that can sit on the actual devices as that last line of defense to stop things from actually happening. The challenge was that we really didn't have anything that was built for OT previously, so we're utilizing a lot of older, IT-oriented tools. The challenge with most of the IT tools, some of the best ones out there, are expecting continuous daily updates so that they can get their updates to stop the latest threats. So, and CrowdStrike was famous at doing this and did a really good job. But last July of 2024, they had their incident where they took down, half the world, and we saw them been applied to some OT systems, and those systems were down for days to weeks, so it was very, very, very disruptive. So the industry kind of realized at that point that there needed to be a better way to do what I would call locking down those vulnerable, out of support, out of protection applications. So that's where companies like us came about. And, the tenet really there was to provide that additional line of protection so that we could go right down into your HMIs, your historians, your engineering workstations, your servers running your factory automation, but also we could then embed ourselves into the RTUs and all that level and provide that stack that Ryan was talking about to provide that level of defense. So that's where the industry's kind of gone to. And we're probably one of the first ones out there that you'll see other vendors joining that are building purpose-built products to solve this problem.
And just real brief to layer on to that, I call it the moat, right? That's the old way of doing it. You draw a moat around the sensitive systems, and that doesn't really work in 2026. And the extension, the old way, you have the moat, and then you'd have there's a variety of like legacy change control applications that just completely lock the system down, and that was the classic way. Now the challenge is the old guard of change control basically lock them down. It's not very functional. It's not very usable, especially in a more dynamic age, right? And this is where Acronis partnership with ARIA, I think, makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to provide that level of protection for the legacy devices in a more nimble, more usable way. But the carry-on is, business continuity is a big part of this sort of capability from a cyber resilience perspective, is being able to roll back these sort of changes as they're being occurred. Talking about the old way, keeping the closet full of spare hardware, right? Spares, or desperately searching eBay for an identical model of a 20-year-old device. Using solutions like Acronis allows you to be a little bit more nimble, recovering to different platforms where you can maintain these devices on the network in a controlled manner. And if something happens, because maybe it's 20 years old, it doesn't have to be a cyber incident, the motherboard could just fail, then being able to recover them and get them back online is a very good approach.
And if you continue to speak about the difference between IT and OT, why is forced OS migration so disruptive in IoT, and what risks do teams often underestimate?
Before Gary jumps in, forced in OT it probably should come with quotations, because to the earlier comment of the CIA triad being inverted, the CEO Dragos has a saying, he's like, IT is how you manage business, OT is why you're a business. So most of these organizations kind of adhere to that sort of philosophy where there's a little bit more discretion given to this. But the underlying point is they can't just update, they can't just change things. Maybe their vendor doesn't allow it. Maybe that operating system, that version of the application is the only thing that supports this $1 million robot, right? And so the ROI on replacing that $1 million robot doesn't really jive with the OS upgrade. So it makes it very, very hard. The cost and impact kind of analysis is a lot different. So Gary, I mean, this is your world, though. I'm sure you have more to add on to that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Thanks. That's a really good way to frame this. Again, as Ryan was saying, is that the OT world, when you look at it, they build these systems out, these industrial automation systems. If I look at Rockwell Automation, Emerson, Honeywell, Schneider, ABB, you just go through the whole list of them. These are massively expensive to actually put in and tune and make them work. And in some cases, I look at the Honeywell site, they still say we run on Windows 10. There is no other option, as Ryan was saying, to move off of Windows 10 right now. So, but that is alarming, because then the customers are like, okay, what am I going to do if there's no more patches coming to protect that operating system? So, that's why vendors like us, realized this was happening earlier in the decade and started to figure out how we could actually go in and provide this level of what we call lockdown around the OS and block the vulnerabilities that are down in the OS, as well as the applications from exploit. And that's a whole other part of the conversation, which we can get into, and Harold will show a little bit of a demo on that. So the point was, though, is if we could do that, then to Ryan's point is there's this huge business model problem that we can solve, is that we can lengthen the life of these operating systems. Because if you go in there today and you hadn't been planning for it, most of these systems, and we were just at Rockwell Automation Fair and Ryan joined us there, they said in the main meeting that they were looking at their install base. 70% of their install base was running on Windows 10 or earlier operating systems at that point. So there was a reason for that, because people made massive investments and it took years to get these systems operating properly. And there was also some issues that when you start to see Windows 11 and some of these next generation OS architectures appearing, some of the same functionality didn't run the same way. There was performance issues. So what was really concerning is most of these people, as was said earlier, are looking at, if I'm going to go from Windows 10 to Windows 11, I am probably looking at replacing the hardware. And if you're replacing hardware and OT, you're probably looking at a 2-year project to get this right. And you're looking at a massive expense, because you're probably having to set up labs and prove all this stuff in. And we go to half the environments. We were in one pipeline manufacturer, and they're like, our lab looks like a little wiring closet over here. There's no way we could do this. We're going to have to actually phase it in through some third parties' labs, and then build into these massive maintenance windows to try to phase this stuff in while we try to keep the pipelines operational. And by the way, the ROI model doesn't justify this. This is going to be one massive millions and millions of dollars that we'll never see ever back, because we're not improving our production or our capacity one little bit. So these are the massive challenges that are going on there. And that's why people have to have time in OT to adequately prepare for all these challenges. And we're trying to make sure we can solve that problem, saying if you put a product like ours in, you can buy the time so that you can migrate as you're able to, or in some cases, we got people saying, I'm just fine sitting here for another 3 years. That's okay too, because that might be a competitive advantage.
Let's then talk a little more about the budgeting. So I showed on the slide just briefly 4 paths that OT teams can take. So from your perspective, how does budgeting realistically influence their choice?
Here, you want to take this one, or you want me to give comment?
Why don't you go?
Well, I mean, look, to my earlier point, as the internal projects and goals collide with the rising regulatory environment, it's dramatically elevating the requirements for the organizations. And so, from a budgeting perspective, it's not just the cost to buy the tool, right? You also need to staff it. You need to have people that manage it, right? And is that one person? Well, typically not, because what if that person goes out? And then you need to have somebody that can backfill, right? So being able to kind of fund not just the cost of the solution, but also management becomes a big challenge. And kind of like the dam where you're trying to plug it with your hands, you don't have enough hands, right? And so what we're starting to see is organizations looking to consolidate, right? Get more, solve more problems with fewer tools and fewer people, right? And those solutions that help them do that are ones that are kind of having an impact within the market. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I'll look at this because this is where we live. So I'm saying that most of the customers we see, unless their DCS vendors legislated it, they didn't have the long-term operating systems. They were like, that's extra work, extra effort. We just went with whatever is in front of us and weren't thinking about all these problems. So most of them are dealing with straight, I'm looking at Windows 10 and what do I do? So what we're trying to show them is, a way to look at it from a perspective of what is it going to cost you to move forward? So when we've gone out and engaged with customers, so we've engaged with certain customers, I won't go into their personal details because they shared us some of their business models, but we've gone into manufacturers and they're saying that for each HMI, whatever they have, they're budgeting $50,000. And this has been a figure we've heard over and over again per device. That covers what they think it's going to be the operational cost, the people cost, as well as the hardware costs to do the upgrades. $50,000, per endpoint. And that's, something they will never probably get back because they're not expecting any ROI on that upgrade. So, we go in there and show an ROI model with them and we're like, our device is going to give you, in that case, a 50-to-1 ROI, immediate savings, our application to preserve those devices. So that's where you've got this dramatic, momentary situation where Windows 10 suddenly ended and there was so many devices were on Windows 10. But this is going to keep happening over and over again. So people are starting to say, we've got to come up with a better way, because if you go into and talk to some of these plant managers, they will say to us, they're like, look, I have a thin staff in operations and I'm not getting any help from corporate IT, saying, hey, we're going to send a team of 100 people across all these different plants and help you do the migration. So now I've got to go find other people outside to help me with system integration and others. And it's going to cost me a bundle. And I've got to plan this and it's not my budget. So they're all scrambling now, looking for how to solve these challenges. Plus, then there's the risk of doing the upgrades and the updates. And that's a real concern, because once you start replacing hardware and getting things running, you're literally talking about weeks to months to make sure that that's going to work right. So you could have long maintenance windows and really have long disruptions in your production as you try to go and phase this stuff in.
And as we talk about systems that cannot be upgraded, let's talk a little bit from the compliance angle. So how does the defensive compliance looks like across various OT specific compliance regulations?
I would say, look, I don't pretend to have a PhD in every compliance, right? And so the answer to that is going to depend on the industry that you're in, the country that you're in. So it's very difficult to paint with broad strokes. But the easiest way to paint with broad strokes is just look at NIST 2. So the NIST 2 framework pretty much looks foundationally like all of the regulatory frameworks as well. And so that tells you that there's the 5 main points from NIST 1: identify, protect, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And then with NIST 2, they added the governance function around it, right? And so if you follow that framework, you have a program to monitor and manage your risk and make intentional decisions on what you're doing. Identify, you have some proactive measures, figure out what you have out there, take measures to try and reduce the risk. If you can patch it, you can patch it, or prevent risk if you can't patch it in other ways, like things like ARIA, right? Be actively monitoring what's going on in the network. And if something does happen, have capabilities to be able to recover and return business to normal operations, right? So these are things that Acronis helps with on the proactive measure, from inventory and vulnerability assessments, as well as the recovery on the business continuity side. And then we have integration with partners like ARIA that help us kind of complete that overall story to have a holistic solution in as easy to manage package as possible. So to go back to compliance, if you're following NIST 2, chances are you're pretty close to whatever regulatory obligation you have in your industry.
Yeah, let me build off of that, because it's a good piece of it. The other part is a lot of this is being forced by these audits, and Ryan just touched on them. So a lot of the auditors will come in and say, okay, look, these things are out of support. You've got to replace them. Unless, and here's the big unless, to get a jail free card, you have a compensating control. Juliana, you just mentioned that earlier in the slides. So that's where we come in. We come in and say, look, we can come in here, lock these devices down. We provide the defense in depth that is being advocated for in the NIST cybersecurity framework. But now you have the compensating control that says, hey, we can protect these operating systems and any legacy applications that are riding on top of them from the attacks. So now you have an ability to pass the audit. And we just went through this with a large food manufacturer just this past week, going through a lot of that, providing information into their auditors so that they could pass this compensating control and put this solution out to their 22 manufacturing sites.
And as we all know, Windows 10 will not be the last OS to reach end of support. So let's a little bit cover how to build a long-term strategy to protect OT environments.
Gary, I'll give you the lead on this one, and then I'll finish up with my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you framed out earlier a good set of choices. People are saying, hey, I can go to LTS and buy more time, but you're buying time. And then you got to face it every time the LTS changes. And then I can buy the support from Microsoft, but that gets costly. And eventually that runs out, to provide support any longer. So then you're facing a change. So that's where, when we come in and look at it, the way to think about this is that good cyber practice, good cyber hygiene is to have defense in depth. If you have defense in depth that provides the compensating control, that can be your strategy so that you can lock in for now with what you have, stay with what you have, and then migrate as it makes sense for your business. Ryan did a really good job of describing that. There'll be times when it's time to move to a new set of functionality that you're going to get from your DCS vendor. They're going to have a lot of features that you're going to want, or new business lines you want to open up and leverage those features. That's the time to move forward with all of that, because you've got a ROI model that's going to pay for it. Where there is no ROI model to pay for it, it's better to stay with what you have. So we want to make sure we provided that option forward, which is stay with what you have, but have the compensating control there so that you can maintain that business model you have, while also minimizing your risk. Because if we don't do that, we're not doing you any favors.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, I think Gary said it right. The solutions like ARIA provide the customers options, the users of these systems options, and flexibility, right? So it prevents your hand from being forced. And ultimately, go back to one of my original points, just make intentional decisions, right? If you're reactive, okay, Windows 10, LTS is end of support in January 2027. Well, that's a desperate problem for you now, right? And so But there's always going to be the next one. It's not just operating systems, it's applications, it's versions, it's things that are running on these devices as well. So if you're being reactive, you'll constantly be chasing your tail. Having a stack of solutions that provides all of the controls that you're looking for from a protection, reliability, resilience is what's going to be important. Acronis recognized the value of ARIA. That's why we're working together and building the integration to have the unified solution that we believe provides holistic capabilities, both from a proactive security and active monitoring and a reactive perspective, which we think is a great, easy to manage approach. But ultimately, just being intentional about the decision, having a framework in place to manage and purpose build a stack for your OT would be the best advice.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Gary. I'm going to pause us here just to keep on schedule, and let's move to the demos. First, we will start with Harold Cowan, who will walk us through the ARIA AZT Protect, and then Gary will come back and show us the attack on Windows 10 in OT environments.
Hello. We're going to do a quick review of the AZT Trust Center dashboard. This is our main control panel to manage the endpoints and set up security. You can see at the top, we have information about our appliance, list of devices, any alerts, and newly discovered applications. The key to our security is the protection policies. So I'll demonstrate quickly the prevent policy. These are the various countermeasures that are used by our AI kernel level driver to detect malicious actions by binary programs on the system and keep it protected in real time. This is our list of devices. You can see I just have a few machines deployed at this point. And then those machines can be grouped into device groups. This is how we apply a policy to a certain set of machines. And there's also some various settings within the device group around network performance things, timing, etc. Currently, on our alerts, we don't have any alerts, but we're going to trigger some in just a moment. So we're going to do an attack scenario that is similar to a living off the land attack. We'll be using the C# compiler and MS build. In this scenario, the AZT management computer that you see here is my domain controller, and it's been compromised by the hackers. They've been using network tools to sniff the network and decode the passwords of my two HMI servers. One is in detect mode, the other is in prevent mode. So now we're going to launch our attack. This is a PowerShell attack using the stolen credentials of those computers. So we'll let that run. You can see here notifications popping up, and the system has been compromised by the Black Widow. It's an internal test tool that we use. It doesn't actually do anything malicious. But for the benefit of the operator, we can have local notifications that tells them that something has happened to their computer. On the left-hand side, you can see it's been prevented, nothing got hacked, and there were no notifications because the notifications are turned off. We now go back and review. We can see several different alerts that happened. So we're going to filter down for the system that's in detect mode and talk about this attack. So we're using the PowerShell attack. We're going to call the C# compiler and create two unknown DLLs. So we get write buffer hits indicating unknown files have been created on the system. Those two DLLs are read back into MS build, and one of them contains shellcode. The shellcode then calls the C# compiler again and creates the Black Widow, so another write buffer alert. And then the Black Widow is executed. So for this simple attack, you can see we have 5 alerts and 4 different countermeasures were triggered, indicating something was going wrong. Now we're going to clear the filter and go look at the other system that's in prevent mode. Here you'll notice the same pattern of calling C#, but in this case, when the write buffer was detected, we terminated the C# compiler from memory, and we blocked the DLL from being written to the hard drive. So our write buffer in the kernel was used to prevent this file creation. So the system doesn't even have a malicious file on it. We can then dig in further into the alert to see what happened. We can see the command line that was used in the C# compiler, the file that was attempted to be created, but we were in prevent mode and our write buffer stopped it. Now we do know now that this administrator account has a compromised password. So as a first step, the password should be changed. We also know the machine that was attacked and date and time. So if you have any network monitoring, you can determine where the attack came from and more information about that attack.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Windows 10 end of support attack scenario that is being seen out there in the wild. Okay, all right. So what you're seeing here is a system where, let's say we're a manufacturer and we have a share set up for all the updates, and we're going in there, grabbing all the updates, and one of them it says Windows 10 KB, blah, blah, blah. If you're not paying attention, you say, okay, let me grab that too, not realizing that, wait a minute, why would there be a Windows 10 update here? I think they just ended support. Are we on the ECS program? I don't know. Let me grab it. Let me go. Or you're just mechanical and you're just grabbing everything that you found on the share. Could have been dropped by your SI or one of your contractors, and you're just going through the process. They follow through. There may be actually a security warning that pops up, on some of these files that Windows say I can't necessarily identify, what this is, but on a lot of Windows updates, you see this anyway, because they don't sign everything completely themselves, or it's a zip file and they haven't looked at it. So they're warning you that, hey, this is a zip file, you're about ready to open it. In this case, it's not that, but you get so used to this, you just typically say, all right, let me go ahead with it anyway. All right. So it starts to do its install on the machine. You're looking at the machine, you're in, I see the install, and then we're on the machine with AZT, and suddenly you'll get this message. Something happened. Windows Update Standalone Installer. Windows Update Standalone Installer encountered an error. This system could not find the specified file. Okay, so that's indicating that something happened here. Usually people are scratching their heads, but if they know we're there, they flip over to our Trust Center window that Harold was just showing you. And if you go into our alert section real quick here, you'll see there's 3 alerts. And if I go through this quickly, the first application is WUSA.exe. Now that's an official Microsoft application. Unfortunately, this one was compromised. So it was actually a malicious version of that, because what it tried to do is then spawn and build, so compile 2 additional programs on the fly. And these 2, as that did that, these 2, popped up, and all 3 of them were then blocked. The WSA was now blocked, and these new malicious files that were compiled on the device were also blocked. So that's what's happening here. We basically saw the update trying to happen, and then when it was in its process of executing, we intercepted that. The reason we can do that, and we're uniquely positioned for this, is that we have a patent approach because we are a kernel level driver. It's sitting at ring 0. What that means is we can actually see things as they're about to execute in device memory and get in front of them and decide whether they should or not shouldn't. So that's what makes us uniquely positioned to be able to offer these types of capabilities, where we can see the vulnerabilities of this operating system trying to be exploited and get in front of that. Same way we can do with just about any application.
Thank you so much, Gary, Harold. And now, as we all know that the systems need to be protected from the recovery standpoint as well, let's welcome JD and look at the Acronis demo.
Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time with us today. I'm going to run you through a quick overview of Acronis Cyber Protect, what we can and can't do with the platform, and how we're going to be able to help support you with these older operating systems that may no longer have support from the manufacturers, such as Windows 10 is just dying, or we all know that there's older systems out there in the world like Windows 7 and Windows XP, which we still fully support. So a quick dashboard overview, right? You can see here our local console is going to tell you exactly what's going on in the environment, what your status is on your different devices, what your activity history trending looks like. These are all customizable widgets, so you can come in here and modify them, move them around, make them as you see fit. Getting started with the platform, if we come underneath our devices menu here, we're going to see all the different devices that we're protecting with CyberProtect inside of our console here. One thing to remember when you're using our product is our consoles are contextual, meaning that it's only going to show you things that you've added to the environment. So getting started with adding devices is really straightforward. I can come underneath and say add. This is going to give me a list of all the different platforms that we support. You may notice we just say blanket Windows because, as I mentioned, we still go all the way back to Windows XP Service Pack 1, all the way current through Windows 11. So anything you may have in your environment, we're going to be able to help protect. You can see there's other virtualization platforms that we support here as well. Once you have your devices installed or the agents installed on the devices, I can actually come over and look at a specific machine. So for example, this is a Windows 10 machine that I have. If I look at the details on it here, it's going to tell me what IP address range, what agents are installed on it, what version of Windows is inside of there. Creating a protection plan is how we start with our backup and restore and other protection options that we have. So I can see here there's protect for the individual machine, or we do offer you the capability of doing these plans on a group basis. So you can create groups within the platform to kind of keep yourself organized. But if we slide in on a protection plan here, it's going to load what we've already got applied to the machine. You can have as many protection plans as needed on a machine itself. So most folks run with one, but say you had a situation where you needed to do a more frequent file level backup of, say, a database. You could have 2 different plans with 2 different schedules on them to facilitate that. Starting with the backup option, if I come underneath this, I like to say it's about 4 steps. What are we backing up? Where are we backing it up to? How frequently? And then how many of them do I want to keep? In this plan, I'm actually doing replication to a secondary location as well. You can go up to 5 different locations inside of a single protection plan. This gives you real ease of being able to go through and have a 3-2-1s of backups, right? Your offsite backups can be built directly into this, or alternatively, we have other ways of doing replication of the plan itself. So once I have these plans kind of sorted out here, you can see we also get into our antivirus, anti-malware, which we do still fully support. This is both definition and heuristics based. You can kind of see there's individual controls for each one of those, including when you're going to be running your full scans or your quick scans. You can kind of see our behavioral engine is turned on to quarantine. So let's define something on a device, it'll automatically put it into the quarantine. Going further down the line, we offer URL filtering, right? That's done at the DNS level. So we're intercepting the DNS requests from the machines. Vulnerability assessment, we can look at both first-party and third-party applications and check to see if there's any known vulnerabilities against them. So that way you can plan your patch windows better. Patch management as well, and then our data protection map that allows us to look at specific extensions on the device to make sure that we're capturing everything that we need inside of a backup. Backups also can be ran ad hoc. So you may have noticed it as I hover over here, a play button pops up now, or I've got my run now here. So if I needed to, say, trigger a backup before we go into maintenance on a machine, I can actually come in and just hit run now. The way we're designed is our agents do all of the work. So what we're waiting for right now is that agent to check back in. The management layer would then say, hey, agent, I need you to run this task. Once that kicks off, we'll actually sit here in the activities. So we're going to keep a running audit trail of everything that's happening within the entire environment. So you can kind of see here, there's that plan kicking up. I can come down and look for, like, example, the plan that ran this morning. I could see it ran at 5 a.m. Only took a little bit of time. If I actually look into it, I can see how much data it actually processed. So this is bytes processed is what we saw on the device that has changed. Bytes saved is what we've saved after we've done our compression and removed files that can easily be recreated by the operating system. Kicking over to a recovery. There's lots of different ways on a recovery that we can help you out with. The most common, right, is if I needed to just pull something off of this machine. If it's online, I can actually come in here and hit recovery. Here's a list of all my storage locations that this has had backups in. There's that backup we saw taken today. I can come in and say, let's recover the entire machine or files and folders. I also have the capability of doing run as a VM here. So we can take a physical machine and convert it into virtual, or we can take a virtual machine and convert it back to physical. We can go to completely dissimilar hardware as well. So this run as a VM is kind of we call it instant restore. It's a quick way of validating or testing the machines, making sure that your backups are good and that you can get Windows back up and running. This just requires a Hyper-V host or an ESXi host to run as a target. going a little bit further, right? Depending on what your failure mode is, right? What kind of failure happened on the device that is necessitating to a restore, the most common being some form of hardware failure, right? That's where our bootable media comes in. So if I actually come underneath the head icon here at the top and I can come to downloads, here at the bottom, we'll have our bootable media. This is a pre-compiled one. It's an ISO that we offer to you that you can burn to a CD or USB that allows you to, like, say, swap out the hard drive in a machine and then go through and boot that bare metal machine from this media. That gives you an interface to then go through and do the restore. We also do have a boot media builder, an actual application. So if you wanted to have it create directly to a USB stick, we could do that. That also gives us some flexibility in what styles of bootable media that we use. And the last big piece that I want to talk about, and it's kind of a hidden option. So if I come in and look at the protection plan here and I drill into the backup options on it. So if I come in and say, let's edit this plan. And then once I get into the edit piece, if I jump in, like I said, it's a little buried in here, but this is kind of a neat one, especially if you've got users who, you maybe don't want to give them full access to the console, but you don't want to have to be facilitating every single restore for them. It's called one-click recovery. I actually have it turned off on this machine, but on other machines, I have it turned on. What this does is it makes it so we can do a disk level backup, and then we can automatically or give a easy to use recovery option to the user itself. So the way it works is we actually we make a modification of system reserve that points to our bootable media files that are installed with the agent itself. As part of those files, we're pre-compiling a recovery script. So we're taking what we already have inside of this plan as far as where we're backing it up, what the credentials are, right? What frequency of backups is being taken, right? All of that gets pre-compiled into that recovery script that's saved on the device itself. So that way, if you have something like, hey, we need to do a rollback because change control went bad, or you've got a lab technician who needs to go back to a known validated state before they start their next round of testing. This gives them that capability on the device itself. So I've kind of cheated a little bit here and made it so we didn't have to wait for Windows to restart or anything like that. But I went ahead and hit that F11. That's the pre-configured prompt that we have. You can change that, but this shows me the very simple options that we have inside of here, where I can come in and say, let's recover this machine from the latest backup. Let's select a backup from which to recover this machine, or I can say, let's do a manual one. If I hit this top one, it's just going to say, hey, warning, this is going to be a full disk recovery. And if I hit yes, that's automatically going to go look at the product in the background, go and find that backup archive, and then go ahead and load and do that recovery for us. So really easy way to get a lot of good functionality inside of the product itself. We'll see it flash through a couple of screens here. This is pretty normal here because it's actually loading our product outside of that wrapper that we have there. But coming back to the console, right, that's a quick, really fast run through of what Acronis Cyber Protect has to offer to you. As I mentioned, we have a wide array of operating system support, and if you guys want to see more, we can absolutely get you set up for a demo. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, JD. And as we're at the top of the hour, please let me run a quick poll on how you would like to connect with Acronis and ARIA after this event. You can choose as many options as you'd like. And while you're answering these questions, we can take one question to our live Q&A. Gary, Ryan, Harold, JD, if you'd like, please come back to us. And we have time for one question. I see in the Q&A section, there are several questions about the legacy systems. Would you like to maybe talk about that?
Anything in particular that they're asking about legacy systems?
Yes, so they're asking about the options of how to protect. Like, for example, one of the questions is about keeping the Windows 10, Windows 7, and XP machines disconnected from the network. Will that be enough?
Okay. Yeah, as I was saying in my discussion, you've got to watch the fact that those machines still often are approached and updated, via direct connection, even if they're completely separate from the network. In most industrial automation, it's hard to have them completely separated from a local network. So we'll make that assumption. In other cases, you'll actually have engineering laptops that are just not meant to be connected. They're just there to do an update on the OS, or just replace an OS that's been compromised. In those cases, you still want something on that device as that compensating control to be that last line of defense. All right. Now you might say, hey, my risk has been reduced from 100% by having the network connected and no control to 90% because I really, really never ever connect this to a network. but there's still a risk there. So in most cases, we find the risk is a lot higher than 10%. So I would recommend you have some form of compensating control or defense in depth on those systems. Now, as far as where we go, we can go all the way back to Windows XP Service Pack 2. We don't go further back than that. So we're an option to provide that level of protection.
I think Gary addressed that point. I'll touch on a couple of other of the questions to maybe elaborate. One was from Kevin on what we're seeing in terms of the industry trends related to various flavors of Linux or other embedded types of devices like PLCs and RTUs. And so we are seeing increasing adoption of Linux as the operating system for industrial platforms. It's whether you perceive it as more hardened or there's fewer threats. A lot of the vendors are adding that to their portfolio as an option for customers. And so Acronis has supported Linux for many, many years. It's a platform that we're very familiar with and can manage in singular interface just with Windows as well. But not just Linux. We're seeing like ARM types of devices are starting to rise as well. So Acronis is exploring exactly how we want to support more of that. Starts getting into almost IoT types of devices, and the partnership with ARIA that we have is an example of Acronis looking to kind of extend our platform to be able to solve more problems, and we're looking in kind of PLC in a similar avenue, right? To look at being able to offer solutions, holistic solutions to our customers. So from the Acronis perspective, we're going to continue to focus on our core competency. Our product is called Cyber Protect. So cyber resilience, being able to provide proactive measures to prevent risk and also be able to recover those devices back to working condition if anything happens, predominantly built on the x86 platform, so Intel, Windows, Linux. And then, as we get outside of that core competency, we'll be looking at adding partners to be able to extend the capability to provide broad, holistic solutions for our customers. So, Kevin, hopefully that helps elaborate on the answer to your question there. And Julia, if there's any particular question you want to call out to make sure we address, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. I think we answered most of the questions and we're a little bit late on schedule. So we will move forward with the complementary materials that we have for our audience. We will send it to you so you can take a closer look at our case studies, datasheet, and solution brief, several assets for ARIA as well, solutions brief and case studies. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for our speakers. And we hope that you will walk away today from the event with a clear strategy on what to do when OS reached end of support. Thank you everyone.